Hello, this is Miss Dawn, and we are ready to do some art. Today we're going to be doing some painting. So what you're going to need is this little book that says Art Workbook. When you open it up, you'll find a few pages that talk about painting. And some of the information is just how to take care of your brush, how to wash it. And then you'll find something that looks like this that says, I can learn painting. The other thing that you'll need is a set of watercolors. I've got some that I grabbed from the art room. Hopefully you have some watercolors. If you don't, you can just watch and see what I'm doing and try it later on. If you're using watercolors, of course, you need some water. So this is just a little cup that was left over from the laundry that I used, a bowl, old cup, whatever you have, just something with water in it. And then, of course, a brush. If you have watercolor set, usually it comes with a brush. And we're going to be working on this paper right here. So if you want to pause the video to get those supplies, you can do that. And then press play once you're ready to go. Now, you can just work on a table. You may want to put something underneath your paper just to protect whatever surface you're working on. I'm going to be working on this little board right here so you can see what I'm doing. And then next to it I have my color wheel. You can't see all of the color wheel, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the color wheel after we've painted for a bit. So what we're going to do is just try some different techniques. And so underneath here it gives you some suggestions of things you can try. We're not actually going to use alcohol. So what I'm going to do is a resist. And so you can get some crayons out. If you have any crayons, find those. Again, pause if you don't have them handy and get them out. And I am going to draw on here with some different colors with crayons. And I'm going to do a resist. And again, I'm not doing what it says on here. I'm going to cross out alcohol and write crayon. Okay, so the first one is going to be a crayon resist. So I'm just going to add some patterns here with my crayon. Okay, and then when you're using watercolor, you always have to have a wet brush. Over here it says dry brush, but really the paint doesn't work if the brush is totally dry. So when they say dry brush, they're meaning less wet because you have to have at least some water in order for those watercolors to work. I'm going to choose blue, but you can use whatever color you like. But it's best if you're doing a resist to use a color that is not the same color as the crayon if you want this to work. So I'm going to paint over this with my blue watercolor. And it's called a resist because, as you can see, the color, let me get that a little bit closer so you can see it. Okay, the color shows through when I paint, kind of pops out. Okay, because the wax from the crayon does not mix with the water from the watercolor. So you can do some interesting effects with watercolor and crayon. And so the next thing I'm going to try, that one says straw. Now, I don't have a straw handy, and in order to do that, the paper would have to be laying flat. So what you would do is kind of put a small puddle of watercolor and then get your straw and blow it. And then it kind of spreads out. But I'm not going to do that one. So if you want to try that one on your own after I'm finished with this demonstration, if you have a straw in your house, or even, something that you can blow through to push that paint around, you can give that a try. Now the next one says sticker or tape. And again, if you don't have sticker or tape handy, you can just watch me and do it after the demo. So I'm just going to take a piece of tape and rip it up, and you can do shapes or you can find a sticker that has different shapes. I'm just going to put it on there just for demonstration purposes. All right, I've got a couple pieces of tape on there. And this time I think I'm going to use green paint. Now, when I'm getting my paint on the watercolor, you don't want to like jab the brush in there. You want to be very gentle as you're getting your paint, and you're just going to very gently touch and make sure you have plenty of water on your brush. So if the brush is dry, you need to dip it in the water, and you always want to wash the brush in your water cup between colors. So I'm going to go ahead and paint over this so you can see what that looks like. Okay, and now my brush is getting dry. See how the bristles are starting to separate? It's kind of bent. Bring it over there so you can see it. All right, I'm going to rinse it off in my water and get it wet again. And now it's loaded up with paint. You see it looks different. The bristles are all stuck together with paint and water. Okay, so now this paper is really not the best kind of paper to paint on, but if you have better paper, I'd rather we not use the big paper I gave you because I want to save that for other projects, but well, I guess you could maybe use it. All right, let's take that off of there. Right now we're just experimenting. Oh, all right, you can get yourself a pad of paper. It doesn't have to be fancy watercolor paper, just something a little heavier duty. Drawing or multimedia paper. Okay, so you can see when I peeled off the tape, it left the shape of the tape there. None of the paint went to where the tape was. Okay, so a different kind of resist. The paint doesn't go through the tape. All right, so wet on dry is just what I've been doing so far. I have a really wet brush, and let's see, I'm going to do purple this time. I'm going to load up my wet brush with some paint, gently rubbing my brush on the paint. The paint shouldn't be sticky or gooey. If it is, that's you're pressing too hard. It should be very watery. And we get a nice coverage of color there. Okay. Now, a dry brush simply means your brush is less wet. So again, watercolor is not going to work if your brush is totally dry. But I have my paper towel here, and I'm taking a little bit of the water off. And this time I'm using red. Okay, so it's semi-dry, not totally dry. And then I get sort of a rough texture when I paint with a brush that's semi-dry. Okay, let me move that over so you can see the difference. I don't know if you can, how clearly you can see that. So there, the brush is not super wet. It's just damp. Okay, and then wet on wet, you're going to get colors that sort of spread out. And again, if this paper was a little better quality, I'd get a better effect. But I'm going to go ahead and just get this wet. Now it looks a little bit pink because I did not wash my brush really, really well. You really want to wash that brush and then maybe even dry it off on a paper towel if you want it super clean. And I'm going to get a little orange this time. All right, and so when I paint on the paper that's wet, you can see how it'll start to blend a little bit more. I'm going to put another color in there. I'm going to add a little bit of yellow. Just the best way to blend color is that wet on wet. The colors will sort of blend together. And again, I'm going to get a little closer so you can see that. Now, right now, you can see like this dark. That's just because the paper is wet. When it's dry, it won't look like that. That's just because the paper is really saturated with water. Okay, so that is trying different techniques with watercolor. Again, it's really important that you wash your brush between colors so that all the colors are nice and clean. The paint set I showed you looked kind of messy, but the colors themselves aren't super messy. It's just the space around it, and I could even run that under the sink and clean that up. You can actually, part of the reason why this is so messy is you can put paint here and try mixing colors. As a matter of fact, I want to talk a little bit about color mixing and the color wheel. We're going to take a look at another sheet. And in this next sheet, if you do not have any watercolors, you can actually do this next one. I'm just going to tear the page out. Okay, so on one side we have the color wheel. Let me take this and slide it over so you can see the whole color wheel. Okay, so here's our color wheel, and you can see that we have some colors in a big circle here, and it's a color wheel. So we have red, yellow, and blue. Those are our primary colors. And then we have orange, green, and violet. Those are our secondary colors. And we can mix the colors. If we take the red and the yellow and we mix them together, we get orange. If we take the yellow and blue and mix them together, we get green. And if we take the blue and the red, we get violet. Okay, so that's a little bit about color mixing. And on the right-hand side, you'll see some videos, and we're going to actually try that. Okay, and you can actually do this with crayons if you are not using paint. So if you're using paint, you can, again, mix the colors on the lid. Hopefully your lid's a little cleaner than mine. If you're using crayons, I'm going to go ahead and use crayons. So if you are not using paint, you can give that a try. So everywhere you see it says yellow, of course that's yellow. Everywhere you see that it says blue, that's blue. So there's blue here and blue here. And we've got, let's see, where else is there blue? We've got yellow here and yellow here. Okay. And so then it says red. Okay. So red is here. It's a really soft red. Now, on your printer, you actually have, instead of red and blue, if you have a color printer, they use magenta and a turquoise blue because they actually work better for color mixing. So this is the color that you would use. Now, if you don't have magenta in your pack, I've got a big pack of 64 and you can find a magenta. If you have a smaller pack, it might not be in there, but you can also try mixing those colors. So now, let me show you what I mean. I'm going to put a little magenta here. And if you're using paint, of course, you're just going to mix your paint colors. And I got this here. And so now I'm going to try mixing some of my yellow. Just coloring the yellow over top. And you'll notice that it looks like orange. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the blue. I'm going to mix the blue over that one. I'm going to use the magenta over here. Probably going to need to use that darker blue. It's a little harder to mix this color. I don't know if you can see it, but you have violet. It's a purple. And then finally we have yellow and blue. We'll try it with the other kind of blue. Okay, and you can see there's some different kinds of green. Now down here, they're wanting you to mix red and orange and yellow and green and blue and violet. That's getting into, if I move my color wheel over here, what we call tertiary or intermediate colors. And those colors are the ones in between. So when you mix your primary with your secondary, or with your other primary and you get your secondary, you mix the primary with that secondary that you've made, you get what's called a tertiary. They go in between on the color wheel. And I'm not going to demonstrate that because my video's almost out of time. But you can give that a try down here if you would like. I hope you enjoyed learning about color. Please watch the videos that I linked to the left and explore color that way. Also, on the other side of this, please color that color wheel.